Hour of Empower. We're here every day, 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. So if it's that time, you know where to find us. And you can always view from my background profile. I'm so honored today to have my special guest and recently involved connection in the show and having the conversations outside the show. I'm sure you're going to find this a very enjoyable, worthwhile opportunity. Chat is open. We encourage you to use it because that helps us redirect our thoughts and our knowledge to be more relevant and hopefully get people a lot of wonderful takeaways that are applicable soon after. With that said, feel free to chat, and I'll turn it over to Dr. Joanne White, and she can share a little bit about herself.
Thank you so much, Donald. It's really very exciting and an honor to be here. And I have been listening and watching the show, and everybody seems to be so incredible and giving, and I just love it. So thank you. So I'm Dr. Joanne White. Actually I do a lot of writing. I'm a best-selling author. I'm also a coach and a counselor, and I do a lot of energy work and hypnotherapy and incorporate a lot of stuff into the counseling and the coaching that I do. And part of that reason was I had to heal a lot of my own challenges. And once I was able to do that, I thought, well, if I could help myself, if I could heal myself, why not be able to utilize what I've learned and what I've been doing to help other people?
Well, that's great. And, you do fit the model of a person who really enjoys helping other people, has a positive attitude and a positive vision going forward. And I think that's what really people are looking for in other people is more of a aligned friend in a lot of cases, but really sharing a lot of what people are interested in at the same time with each other with a medium like LinkedIn Live, where how else could we have been talking like this to people from all around the world any other way? So, with that said, Kelly's here. Kelly's just great in so many ways, and I know she's got a new show going on, and I advocate taking a look at it. You can never learn too much from too many people, especially if it's so accessible and you already know the people, and it's really about elevating and then helping other people elevate because LinkedIn is something that is turned into a big, big crowd if you're into the commenting, posting, liking. And most people get attention by being louder and sometimes angrier than the person next to them. So to steal off to an island in the sun with a bunch of aligned people without the noise and without the fear, really allows people a runway to soar. So thank you, Kelly. Dan's here. Dan's a great guy into some fantastic things and really got some vision that's incredible. So thank you so much, Dan. Dean is here. Love Dean. He's here almost every day and really brings a lot of Dean to the party. Uh, I mean, he's got a great sense of humor, but really a good-hearted gentleman and somebody that we're happy to be part of the fold. So what do you think about just the opportunity ahead for people to have their own true voice? And I think we need to all tie it into the key word of the day, which is perception. And I'm finding that to be such an interesting word because everything changes when you look at it differently, even though it's the same thing. So, what's your thoughts on perception?
Well, people create their reality based on their perception, how they perceive sensory information, how they perceive themselves, how they perceive other people, but it's really not reality. And what we do oftentimes is we make we believe that it's the reality. And there's something interesting. I mean, a dog whistle, if we don't hear it, does that mean it doesn't exist? Or a tree falling and we don't hear the sound, does that mean it never happened? And so we really have to be able to some extent to distinguish a
Mhm.
little bit, or to kind of sit back a little bit and recognize what's our perception based on. Sometimes it's based on our judgment, it's based on how we've grown up, it's based on our belief system, it's based on how we've been treated. It can be based on so many things, but what's the real truth of it? And how do we shift our perception? And you and I talked a little bit, and I shared some personal stuff, and I'm going to do that now because I just started to. I guess as you get older, it's more comfortable to start sharing some of the stuff that you went through during your life. Okay. So, and I talk with my hands, so I may have to sit on them. But many years ago, when I was first learning how to write, um, I did what they called mirror writing. Now, it wasn't intentional. Basically, what that means is that my teachers couldn't read it. The only way they were able to read it was to hold it up to a mirror. So it was backwards. Now, I thought it was fine. I mean, I didn't know anything different. And from that, I got a lot of strange perceptions from teachers that thought I wasn't going to amount to anything. I wasn't going to be able to do anything because I was so weird and so strange. And there was something really weird with my mind. I actually wrote a chapter just recently in a book, and I started to look up what that meant because I never really looked at that before, Donald. And so there are a couple of different views. One is that there's something really wrong with your brain and da 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 da, and the other one is that you're very gifted. And so I'm choosing to again, it's perception. I'm choosing the one that's making me feel better about myself. But the point is that I had to shift my own perception because of the judgments that made me feel less than and not worthy and really uncomfortable with who I was. And it took a long time, and I may get emotional here, but it took a long time to be able to recognize that those judgments, those perceptions that other people had of me, that my teachers had of me, were not true. I mean, it was for them, but it didn't have to hold me back and make me feel different and not capable. And that took quite some time in my life to be able to feel comfortable with who I am. So I'm telling you this for a reason because I think often, we're living in a world right now where we can judge somebody based on how they look, how they talk, how they walk. And maybe we need to really step back a little bit and recognize, well, just because we're thinking that way or we're seeing that way, is that true? And maybe we need to give ourselves and other people an opportunity, a chance to really examine it differently and step back and pause a little bit and decide, well, let me get to know this person more. Let me get to know myself more. Let's really look at things in many different angles to really come to some conclusion about life, about ourselves, about other people, about the world.
I think that's wonderful. And I think it's something everybody can relate to because while I was thinking of what you were saying, how many young people are feeling the way you are or you were and thinking they were alone, not knowing the person next to them was feeling the same thing about themselves in a different way, a different perception of themselves, right? Somebody may be dealing with looks, somebody may be dealing with relationships, somebody may be dealing with home life, whatever it is. If people could share earlier and open the door to people around them to know that they're not alone, to know that if it's not this, it's that, but it's always going to be something, you know? And I think a show like this allows people to realize how maybe tough they were on themselves, or how unrealistic the responses they were getting from the people who they looked up to or felt had more influence. And that's an opportunity for reinvention. And when you learn that so many people could be wrong about you, you ask yourself, could that happen again with someone else? You know what I mean? And go ahead.
No, I was going to say, but also, what if we're wrong about somebody else, not just ourselves, too? I mean, there are people that are being bullied because of, again, the way they talk or something else. And what happens to those people? What happens to them when they begin to feel that they're not good enough, or there's something wrong with them? How do they get past that? And that's so important. Years ago, I mean, I worked with children with special needs and autism, and I guess part of that was because I had an awareness and a sensitivity of what it was like to be treated differently, and to feel different, and be different, and be observed differently. And I tell a story, and again, a chapter in one of the books that I've just been an anthology written, um, where before I even went to college, I was a camp counselor, and the person who really opened up this program, it was one group with children with special needs, and I was actually the first teacher, I mean, the first counselor. And there was one little girl whom nobody liked. She was part of my group. She used to bite her arms. She used to bite the inside of her mouth. She talked funny. I mean, this was the first time I was ever introduced to kids with special needs, but it was so interesting to see. Nobody wanted to go near her, Donald. Nobody wanted to. They were afraid of her. They didn't know what to make of her. And she also was an anuretic, which means that she just used to urinate, and so there was an odor about her too. And I found a way of reaching her through music, through, I would massage her cheeks, and she would stop biting. And finally she started to respond to me a little bit, and the perception of other people, because she started to feel better about herself, and she started to, be more engaged. Other people's perceptions started to change about her. And I'm going to cry a little bit, but look what it takes. Here's somebody she didn't know. I mean, she had her own issues, and she was ostracized by so many people because of her own challenges that she didn't know what to do with at the time.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And it does show that maybe taking judgment and deferring it, or maybe not even using it on other people, because why not buy some vowels to solve the puzzle? Why not learn a little bit more so you don't shoot before you aim? And where's the rush? I mean, let people be who they are, and get to know them first. And that's hard for people because everybody just wants instant. Add water, and all of a sudden you get it. Go ahead.
No, I think you're so right. And we're so quick, like you said, Donald, to judge. And by that judgment, we make a perception. And sometimes that perception sticks with us. And we follow that thread throughout that's the lens that we see the world, that we see ourselves, that we see other people. But again, why not, as you say, why not pause? Why not step back a little bit? Why not really examine things, and also recognize, well, if this is the way I'm thinking and feeling, what is it doing to other people? What is it doing to how I also embrace myself and move forward in the world? And I think that's so important, to have that pause button and do some evaluation. So thank you for that. I think that's really essential for us.
Well, let me share who's with us since we introduced Dean. We've got Nicole here. Hello, everyone. Hope everyone is having a super Saturday thus far. Then Nicole, who is actually going to be here for the first time next Saturday and has a wonderful story. That's so sad. Not understanding holds us back from reaching out sometimes. It's so good that you reached her at such a young age. And then she goes on, you change that child's perception of herself, and that no doubt would carry throughout her life. Well, I think what people have to understand is if you guess without enough information and you're right, nothing has changed, except maybe you're going to use that again for someone almost like that person. And now you're continually doing something that maybe isn't relevant or necessary. But let's say, to Dr. Joanne's point, what if you're wrong? And you just gave somebody a passport to whatever you stamped on it, right? That you're going to always be slow, or you're going to be always this, or, and sometimes that's the final judgment that came down from somebody who you never knew their intentions, why they said it, what was the purpose. And, if people are so much smarter and better than the people they look down on, why don't they accept the fact that they should better off meet people where they are instead of judge them from where they're not, right? And it's just someone who wants to be a little bit more thoughtful, careful. And, at the end of the day, I'd rather think everything's great and one day find out I was wrong than think every day everything's wrong and find out one day I'm right. Because the next day it starts again. It's believing that makes you project. It's not just saying, and especially compared to doing. And if you're a better person, and why not be the better person? Why not show the better person? So the question is not the weakness in others, it's the weakness in yourself and able to accepting others. Go ahead.
No, and I think that's so right. Right now, we have an opportunity in our world to really be able to shift things. And what are we doing? A lot of people are very judgmental. A lot of people are very angry. And why not, like you said, Donald, why not decide that we want to create a better world, that we want to create people that need to get along with one another, that feel good about each other, that can relate and respond and do some wonderful things together. And I think that's key. And part of that is, like you said, we have to examine our own perception. We really have to take a look at what we're doing, how we're thinking, how we're judging, and really decide, is this the way we want to move forward? Is this the way to embrace other people? And is this the way to make some difference in our world and create a better world for ourselves, for others, for our kids, for future generations? Years ago, that little girl that I was going to major in English literature, and that little girl and the other kids that I work with for the first time really changed my life. So I started to go to school for special education, and I was working with kids with special needs, and further on, many kids were not allowed in school. Like millions of kids who with special needs were not allowed in public school in the United States because of their differences. And finally, there was a law that said, hey, we're giving you money, so let's figure out some way to really educate some of these kids, because if they weren't, many of the kids just stayed home. They were isolated unless their parents had money or the wherewithal to be able to get them some kind of education outside of the public school system. So I finally I was hired as a special education teacher for this one class. I'm telling you this for a reason, because the first little girl was autistic, and they were afraid, I'm going to cry, they were afraid to put her on a school bus. They were afraid that she was going to hurt somebody. So they sent her in a taxi. Now, she's the one that actually got beaten up at her bus stop at one point because of her differences. But it's just so interesting that even at that time, the perception, not just of other kids or teachers, but even just our world was so different, and we were so afraid. going to say one other thing. A few years ago, I was sitting in a diner, and this man was sitting with his child who actually was doing little strange things and making strange noises. He went over to every table and had to well, I guess he felt that he had to apologize to explain what was going on with his child. And I thought, isn't that weird and uncomfortable that we have to do that rather than just recognizing that somebody's going to accept, well, that kid's a little different and that's okay. And he's not bothering us and we can all enjoy our breakfast together, you know. But it just struck me at that time. Sorry, I'm running.
No, no, I think you're doing great. And, you know, what comes to mind is perception is a lot of times based on knowledge share, right? Who are you getting your knowledge from? How often are you getting it? How reliable is it? You know, and how dependable and consistent is it? And, you know, forums like this, where one story now shifts people's perception, whether it's a little bit or a lot. Like you said, in one time it was pivotal to change your educational direction based on the reality of what you were experiencing versus the expectation. Because, and the challenge too with forming an opinion that's not based on anything but mostly ignorance is that you tend to defend it after you acquire it. So now you look for reasons to justify it, because if you didn't, every time you applied that in the past, you would have known you hurt somebody possibly, right? And the question is, at the end of the day, if everybody keeps it simple and just says, did I leave the log pile bigger today than I found it? Then you have something to be proud of, you know, and that could be in any way. Too many people measure it in the superficial. How much do you make? Where do you live? You know, what do you drive? You know, where do you vacation? And you know why? Because that's the easiest thing to see. And it's right out there in front of you. Instead of saying, you know, what are you passionate about? What are you excited to get involved in? You know, and the conversations shift in the way they have because of, in a lot of cases, material benefit. People manipulate and people take advantage of people who, what for whatever reason. And the point is if we can shift one conversation, can we shift enough of all the conversations? Because, you know, I remember in the 50s and 60s, and I date myself, but I was watching something, and like in 1959 or 60, there were like 23 Westerns on TV. I mean, there was the Big Valley, Bonanza, I can name them all, right? And that was the thing of the day. People were just into Westerns. Now you can hardly ever see a Western, right? And so what changes is really who creates the trends, who says, instead of Westerns, why don't we make our conversations about comedies or romances or adventures instead of dramas, mysteries, horror stories? And we have the power to take our vision back and what we hear. Go ahead.
If you've noticed recently, though, there seem to be a lot more stories that are of horror, and I can't even watch them because I'll have nightmares, and violence, rather than what you're talking about, Donald. Why not create more of a community of people who are compassionate and passionate about one another and about life and about their interests? And that's, to me, that would be more exciting rather than watching somebody hurt somebody. And one day I was actually, this is years ago, I was watching a friend of mine who was watching, I was actually cooking, and he was watching this violent whatever on TV. And I was watching his face, which was getting contorted of, you know, and I thought, oh, I mean, look at what it, and he was probably very unconscious of what was going on with him, but look at what was going on internally with him watching that, and what we perceive and also what we ingest a little bit on an unconscious or subconscious level from watching this stuff, and it becomes the norm. And we see that with violence right now, it's just, we see that in terms of, it's so easy to turn on the news and find out that somebody has been shot or killed based on what? Based on perception or judgment that shouldn't be there.
Well, I think what it speaks to is people are now having a hard time discerning reality from unreality. I mean, if you're sitting in front of a computer all day with battle tanks and shooting people, or high speed racing and people flying off the road, and you do that for hours, and then you walk out into the normal, let's say, physical world, if it's normal, you're still got all that stuff in you, right? And if you do that every day, right, eventually you forget where you're at. Are you in front of the screen or in front of someone else? And the other thing is, people can walk away from things so much easier than they can walk away from people. And to your point, if you find yourself uncomfortable, it's time to leave. If you got into a room that was just too hot, you wouldn't just figure out how I can stay here. You'd be, how do I get out of here?
Right.
Or if you were in something physically, and you said, I'm not driving in that, but people, whether they're shy, whether they're embarrassed, whether they've been taught, and this, we can't generalize about everybody, and there are people who are confident, strong, have boundaries, take care of themselves, preserve things, and then have time to help people because they're not in defense. They're not thinking, how am I not going to get hurt here? Who is this person? Because we do the same things that people do to us in different ways, right? When's the last time you judged something before you had a chance to taste it or see it or be it? Or more importantly, if someone says, I got a great Italian restaurant, it's the best place I've ever eaten, they're creating a perception before you even put your perception together. When you walk in, you're going to be thinking, oh, this is going to be great. But the same person talking about the same restaurant and me will say, listen, you better be careful there. There's things you can't eat there, or blah, blah, blah. You're going in with that. And, I think if you look at everything as a relay race, the idea is when you get the baton, you run. And when it's time, you hand it off to the next person to allow them to run. Right? So you're part of whatever process it is that connects people or disconnects people. And how do you want to show up? And I think that's the key. Which you are you bringing to the table every day? And how many times do you get humble enough or modest enough to accept all of your imperfections and be proud of yourself still?
Or even to be able to move forward, if we have fear of taking the next step or whatever, and that's something that we're looking at a new situation with that perception of fear, how do we get past it? How do we be able to move forward and maybe embrace something new that could be wonderful and exciting and lead to a different career or different interactions with people? And that's so important because, again, we can change those perceptions. That's the beauty of it. I mean, we do have that ability, but it takes conscious awareness, firstly, of what we're perceiving and how and maybe why, and looking at that and again, pressing that pause button a little bit, Donald, so that, well, do I really want to move forward? I mean, do I want to be fearful my whole life? Can I just look, okay, this is a scary moment and it's a fearful moment, but I'm going to try it. I'm going to do it anyway. And then be able to move past that moment, because I've had to do that. And wow, okay, I did it. Yeah, it was scary. Your heart's beating, da da da. But I did it. And now the next moment, the next new adventure or new whatever it is, maybe that fear won't be so high. And maybe I'll remember that I was able to overcome that in that instant for the last one and take that next step. So our perceptions, not only about our other people, but also about ourselves, can be limiting and limit us in terms of how we see the world and how we move forward in our lives.
Yeah, exactly. And I think what's so vital to all of what you just said is for people not to have all their eggs in one basket, not be dependent on one viewpoint. You know, they say a poll of one isn't very credible, right? And if that's all you've heard was one person tell you something and that changed everything for you. And you know, you have to be your own best friend. You got to be your EMS that comes to your rescue as soon as you get injured in some way. And I always say to myself, first of all, you know, having an attitude of gratitude. You know, whatever happens, I have to think, okay, what do I have? Not what I just lose, what did I just encounter? And the other thing is to know this will pass. Everything does. And if you do an experiment and you say 30 days ago today, what was I worried about at this moment in my time of day? You will remember a year ago. I mean, unless it was dramatic, but that's not the point. You know, I think to our early conversation, what molds perception is where do you spend your time? Who do you spend your time with? What do you spend your time on? You know, if you were going to a school, you'd pick out your curriculum, right? You'd look at the classes and say, "Hey, I want to take this. I want to learn more about this." You know, you wouldn't just say, "Give me whatever you got," you know, and whatever it is, I'm okay with it. And so many people do take potluck. Too many people are like, "Hey, I don't know, okay," you know, and that's where learning the skill set of building a happiness plan. People are so focused on their financial plan, on their social plan, but you know, how do you get happier every day because of what you do for yourself? Too many people are also thinking, if I help the world, I'm helping me. Sometimes it's true, and a lot of times you exhaust yourself, and the world, you know, it's like dropping some water in the ocean, expect to make a wave, you know. So it's the little things you can do that you can see when you do them. I think that makes a difference. So, Nicole, I just want to share what she has to say. What is difference though? If we lived in a world full of those little girls, we would be the strange one. People need to have empathy. You know, that's so true. The father might have had the best intention, but his actions, if understood by his child, would only serve to make her feel even more isolated. What's your thoughts?
You know, I think again that compassion and being able to see things through how would we feel? How would we feel if we were ostracized? How would we feel if we were that little girl or if we, you know, and I think that's important. That's about empathy, and that's really being able to put ourselves in somebody else's situation and think, well, that would make me uncomfortable. That would hurt me. Why would I do that to somebody else when I wouldn't be able to feel good about myself if I was in that same situation? And that's key. And also that gratitude piece that you talked about. I mean, I wake up every morning just being thankful I'm alive. I had a head injury a few years ago where I wasn't able to talk and I wasn't able to I mean, sound, light and sound and everything was so intense. My world, my perception of the world was really very different at the time and I was very isolated. And being alive and being able to be here and have a conversation and be somewhat cogent and have a complete sentence is, you know, is a gift, and we take those things for granted, that, you know, we can talk, we can smile, we can relate, we can walk. I once was doing something with a client who had a lot of money and she was really unhappy, and I said to her, how did you, do you, you know, do you have kids? Oh yeah, I love my kids. Do you have, you know, a husband? Oh yeah, I have a husband. Do you have, you know, how did you get here? I drove my car, which was a brand new car, and I walked here. I said, so look at what you do have. Where, you know, again, what are we focusing on? Where are we putting our attention? And it made her pause a little bit, Donald, to think about, wow, you know, I'm focusing on the negative when look at all the wonderful gifts that I have that I take for granted. my kids, my husband, my ability to move, to be able to talk, to drive a brand new car that she had every year. I mean, hello. It-
Hmm.
and that's perception, and we can shift that. And she called me up about a few days later. She said, "I want to thank you." She said, "Because I did have to step back a little bit and look and change my she didn't use the word perception, but change how I felt about things based on our conversation." So maybe conversations like what we're having right now can actually also be able to make somebody step back a little bit and press that pause button and say, "Hey, maybe I've been too hasty in that situation about that person or about myself or about life or whatever." When I was younger and I had all that judgment going on, I internalized it. And so my head would say to me, my thoughts would go, "Joanne, what's wrong with you? You can't do this, you can't do that, you can't walk." And I was filled with all this negative judgment that I had incorporated. And it took a lot to shift that. And now all those thoughts are incredibly calm. And every once in a while, it's like, "Good job, Joanne." But it took a lot of shifting and working with that inner dialogue that I had taken on from other people's beliefs about myself to get to a place of comfort with me. Yeah, we all, we're all, I always say we're perfectly imperfect and imperfectly perfect. So we're not going to have everything wonderfully correct, but so what? And we also judge ourselves based on other people. I said to somebody the other day, she said, "Well, I'm very uncomfortable being in a crowd. Somebody's wearing a better dress." Or I said, "There's always going to be somebody who's smarter, who's more beautiful, who's stronger, or whatever. But so what? Why are we basing our lives and our interactions on that rather than just enjoying what we do have and the ability to relate to one another and create a sense of community?"
I think, it's so profound what you're saying. And I believe until you accept yourself, how do you expect anybody to accept you? Until you honor yourself, how will anybody want to honor you? Because it's your music, not your words, that people hear and keep with them, right? And if you're confident, and I always believe success is an attitude,
Yeah.
right? And if you have that attitude, there's a saying, "I've been broken but never broke," or "I've been broke but never broken." I'm sorry, don't want to get the wrong message out there. And here's the thing: is there is something to enjoying your challenges, to laughing at them. How many times does someone say, "I'm so clumsy," and they start cracking up? Versus, "I'm so clumsy, I don't know why I do what I do," and all this. They give them their. Not only do they give a picture of what it is, they give a narrative to support it. Not only am I clumsy, but I'm the worst clumsy, and I'm the this clumsy, and I'm the that clumsy. And it's like, well, why did you even stop saying it? If you said it three, why don't you say it 300 times? When is enough enough? And when do you become the judge who is lenient on you, that gives you probation, that says, we're not going to put you in a jail for the next 45 minutes and have you try to break out of it. And when you break out, you just came from jail. How good are you going to be when you get out of jail? And it's all, you got the keys. And that jail can turn into a mansion in your mind if you choose to. Go ahead.
No, I was thinking about what you said, and I was in a I talk to myself, and sometimes I answer myself. So I was in a supermarket, and I was talking to myself out loud and answering, and there was somebody there, and I said just what I said. I talked to myself, and she said, "I do too," and we both laughed. And I love to be able to be out in the world and bring smiles to people, whether it's, "Your dog is so wonderful. Look out." I said somebody the other day, "I love your glasses. They were bright purple." And somebody had a great hat. It's so easy. It really is easy to go into the world and make people smile for a moment, and it shifts people's perception of their day. It makes people feel lighter, and it makes people relate to one another. There's this woman, I don't even know her name. She and I do what I call a power walk in the morning. She and I sometimes meet each other. I'm walking one way, she's walking the other way. We go just in the street and we start laughing. I mean, I don't even know her name, but it's just a funny little way of connecting that's so easy and gentle and loving, and it touches hearts.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, perception and perspective is so interrelated because most people see what they want to see and not always what they should see, right? And it's just like LinkedIn. Whatever you do every day, it gives you a score, tells you how many people watched it, and you can decide, was that a good score or should I change something? Every day, if you look at it again in a time perspective, if someone said this is your last day, your perception would change immediately. Bills would go away, things in the future would disappear, and they say live every day like it's your last because one day it will be, right? And why not be happy the next day? Every day I wake up, I say I got another ticket at a roller coaster of life. How much fun can that be? And if you can make things about it and not you, right? Where you don't get affected directly when someone doesn't like what you said or doesn't like whatever it is. And sometimes it's hard for people, but some people are right with their perception of you, right? And it's a nice time to say, thank you so much for pointing something out. I really appreciate it, because you want to encourage them to come up with the right feedback for other people. They say a kid, by the time he's 5, has heard 20,000 no's and 5,000 yeses, right? And you could say to Johnny, hey, you're so smart for not touching the stove and getting burned, versus stay away from that. You're going to burn yourself. I mean, it's already predicting it's going to happen. You're going to do it. It's just don't do it right now. And then you carry that with you when that same person who really thinks they love and care about you and want to protect you are really lowering your self-esteem, your independence, your fear factor goes up. And all of a sudden you look at everything as scary and could harm you, versus, hey, what can I apply myself to make things better, to be curious? You want people to keep searching. When you stop searching, I talk to some people who are in really, really bad shape. And I would say to them, what keeps you going? In most cases, they say, I'm just curious what's going to happen tomorrow. It's like a mystery. I don't want to miss, even though, whatever their situation is. And every day can be a blessing. Every day can be, a opportunity to move to a place with other people. And at the end of the day, all we're talking about here when we talk about perception is people.
Again, we're having a conversation, we're communicating, we're alive. That's a gift. That's really a gift. And you said something, it reminded me of years ago. I was driving my car and this young boy ran out in the street, and I had to put on the brakes really fast. His mother came out and really hit him really hard. She was nervous, she was worried, and I just thought, as I was finally getting ready to drive, like, couldn't there have been another way to get that across rather than beating him? I didn't say anything. But is where is that kid going to go with that feeling that every time I do something that's not right, I'm going to get beaten, or that my mom's afraid that I'm going to get hurt, she's going to hurt me? What happens to that child? What happens to us if we're not only doing that to our kids, we're doing that to ourselves? And I don't necessarily mean physical beating, or we're doing that to other people. And we need to recognize that we have choices, that we can look at things in a different way. We can shift our perception, we can shift our perspective, and we can move about life differently and decide to do things in a new way. So why not embrace a positive attitude? Why not be more grateful? Why not decide that rather than judge somebody based on their color or the way they speak or whatever, or their religion, that I'm going to just really see how this person is as a person, compassionate or kind or gentle or funny or what, and maybe be able, again, because I'm all for, let's change our world. Let's create a world where everybody can get along and have fun, and recognize the beauty and the specialness and the individuality of all of us, which can really, I mean, we have so much to learn from each other and also from ourselves if we take the time and if we use that perception, that judgment.
Yeah, and if you're constantly learning, you're constantly changing. And for things to change, we have to be the agent of change.
Yes.
Waiting for something to happen is going to happen whenever it happens. Doing something to create something happening may get you there faster and avoid someone having to serve you to make you more of who you want to be. And, to that story of the young boy, that wasn't an incident. That's how he lives his life in that house. That mother is going to be that mother when they get home. And if you get consistent negativity and things that don't work in your favor, you're going to repeat that through your kids. And that's really what modeling is about. And everything ripples, whether inside someone or from someone. If someone's having a bad day, the next person's going to pay for it because they're going to deal with maybe a person who's angry or frustrated. There are always times when I go to work and I'd be halfway there and say, I'm not ready to go. And I'd pull off and go to a park and walk for 20, 30, 40 minutes. And then I felt better and I got my mind clearer. Uh, and I was so much smarter than plowing ahead, taking something with me I didn't want to begin with, and then sharing it with others, and you see that it's not your life, but it's your life and everybody in your life and could be in your life that is proud of you, praying for you, pulling for you. And there's an obligation, you know, to be the best person you can and to show them they don't have to worry about you. Now you can take care of people, and I think it's that perception of I can do it on my own and I don't want to. I'd rather do it with people, but I know I can still do it without them. No one should be someone else's crutch. Somebody should be somebody's elevator, and ask people, where do you want to go? I might be going the same way. You'd love that when you're driving someone far and you're by yourself. So, hey, come on for the ride. It'll be a lot more interesting. And I think that's what people, again, their perception is, who do I want to take for a ride today? If you got a beautiful new sports car, right? You'll be thinking, hey, wouldn't it be great if I had somebody in the seat next to me and we could put the top down and have some fun for a while? Life is whatever you make it. You could find beauty in a color, in a bird, in a flower. It's everywhere. What are you buying into? Go ahead.
No, I was walking last year. I was walking and just at the right moment, and that's key here. And I turned and I looked at this bush, and there were all these butterflies on it, and the bush was all lit up. And I thought, isn't that amazing? That's kind of a miracle that I was there at that moment, and there was this incredible light of these butterflies. And again, how we see things, the beauty that we can take from each experience and be able to turn it into something wonderful for ourselves, and just have a sense of joy for who we are and for what we're doing. I mean, I have a song that I sing with the birds. I made up this song for the birds. I'm not singing it because the birds like it, but anyway, the point is that when I'm singing the song to them as I'm walking, they don't fly away. So there must be, and I was telling somebody the other day, because sometimes when I'm walking and I do some experimentation. So if I'm going like this, you can't see it, and I'm flying, presumably like a bird, that I'm thinking, okay, so as a joke, what are the birds thinking? Okay, let's make a bet. What do you think this human's going to do? You think that, and obviously that's not what they're doing. But again, I was telling somebody that, and we both had a great laugh over it. And there's so much time and ability for us to lighten ourselves and to light up our world with excuse me, with some silliness, with some compassion, with some playfulness. So I think it's important. I'm probably steering a little bit away from perception, but I'm having fun. So thank you,
Well,
Donna.
when you're talking about perception, it gives you an open field for about anything because it does tell you how this is how you look at it. So, and not everything has to be a finished product when you're working on it. You ever do a jigsaw puzzle and you never say, I'm going to finish this before I go to bed? In most cases, when I used to do them, because we used to take the kids to YMCA camp out here, they got a couple beautiful ones in the mountains. And no telephone, no TV, but they always had games and puzzles. So we'd always take out the jigsaw puzzle and everybody would do what they did until they lost interest. And then you couldn't see any more pieces until the next day. And then they showed up again. And it's the same thing in life. If you look at everything as a work in progress, as you're in the race, no matter where you are, you're still in the race and the race is still on. Right. And if you look at that as no one's ever lost until they've quit, and the reason they have to keep the score at that point, there's no more score to be had. But, the other thing is what is winning? What is losing? What is failure? And to your point, whatever it is you've gone through up until this point has gotten you where you are. Everybody and everything had a purpose in molding you to everything you are, good and bad. But why not give the credit to the people who gave you what allowed you to be who you are today, who gave you that ability to go beyond where you thought you could go, And I think that's why people are so much into here's who I am instead of here's what I can do for you. If someone gave you $100 bills every day and said your only job is to pass these out, you would have the best job in the world, right? It's like, hey, who needs this 100? Or more important, who do I care about that I'd love to share this with? And what's a $100 bill? Today, it goes pretty quick, but a smile, a handshake, you're okay, I'm okay, we're okay, or let me tell you a joke for 30 seconds. You got 30 seconds, right? And if you just put yourself in that mode of being the male person who delivers every day to so many people with something you have that's overflowing, whether it's knowledge, whether it's wisdom, but most of the time it's perception, right? Because here's how I perceive you. And based on my perception, here's how I'm going to work or help you, because you are worthy, you justify what I have to give, and if everybody did that with the person next to them, or the 10 people they come in contact every day, if it was just awareness, that should be another word, is, hey, did I leave this person as happy as I could have? And do it in a way that's comfortable for you and gratifying for you. So if it becomes work or trouble, you won't do it. If it becomes, hey, once I saw that person's face, I met a lady who was a huge CEO, and she was given a keynote, speech. And I met her afterwards, and I said, listen, boy, that's incredible. How did you ever get to where you are? And she said, I was a young girl, about 10 years old, walking over a bridge. And I was redheaded and freckled and thought I was the ugliest girl in the world. And she said, this old gentleman walks by and stops. And right in front of me says, you've got the most beautiful blue eyes I've ever seen. And then walked away. And that changed everything. Right. That someone could see that and actually take the time to say it.
I agree. And why do we have to do it just for people that we like or that we know? Why not go into the world and be able to change people by something positive, by remarking on their eyes or their hair or their way that they're, walking or their hat or whatever it is. We can do that. We have the ability to do that. And when we do that, we are creating something very special that we may not even realize. We don't know what, that guy that did that with that woman, he didn't know what happened afterwards. He wasn't there for that story, but it changed her in some way. And I think that's so important to be able to recognize that we can do that. We have that ability to make a difference. And why not go into the world with that? And who knows how many people's lives we can change. We may not know the outcome, but so what? We're there and we're doing something that feels good and special and making somebody smile or feel good about themselves. And to me, it's so worth it and so worthwhile.
Well, and a lot of it gets returned the moment you share it, right? And somebody may say, "Thank you so much. I really appreciate it." And that now is a gift in return for a gift that only you sent first. And that's why it's being proactive. And I don't care. I mean, everybody I cross, I say good morning to in the morning. Everybody. And, sometimes they say good morning back, sometimes they grunt, and
Right.
sometimes they're looking at their shoes so that they can do everything they can not to connect, but that's them. Them is them. It's not you. And if you want to be the better person, start acting the better person. Don't wait for something to happen. I had a young man work for me who took off and became hugely successful, and he was from Pakistan and didn't know the culture, didn't know what was going on. And anyways, kind of took him under my wing, and he always called me Mr. Don. No matter how many times I told him not to, it was always Mr. Don. And he said to me, he says, I've been thinking about charity and how it works. And he says, when I make a lot of money, I'm going to contribute a lot of money. And I said to him, well, why don't you give a little money when you're making a little money?
Right.
Right. And then as you get bigger, then you can add to it. But if you wait for something to happen, there's always going to be something else, right? It's not enough. It's not this. So people are looking for results when they should be looking at getting started. They're looking at the finish line before they even got to the starting line or even worked it or thought of it or learned it, because they're taking the adventure away. If you wanted to read a book, why not read the last page?
Right.
It's faster. Go ahead.
And when we're doing something nice, even if we don't get, wow, thank you, or the good morning or whatever, it feels good. So that in itself, can change your own day because you feel good about having somebody else smile, or you feel good about giving a kind gesture, or making somebody feel special, or whatever it is. And that can make a difference not only for the other people, but also for you. And doing those things without expecting anything is also very important. I mean, why not? That's part of, again, I'm here to change the world, so that's part of it. Don't have that expectation. Just do it because it feels good. It feels good to shift somebody who might be like you said, like looking down at their shoes or whatever, and maybe they get the hello, good morning, and they turn around for a minute and they look at you and they smile. You shifted something. You changed something for that instant, just that instant. How beautiful.
Well, and what's so cool on top of that is when they start saying good morning first, and now not only have you gotten a response, but now you've created another communication opportunity for them to talk to the next person. I think that's the hope for the world, is peer-to-peer access and support. And it can be done over time. Like, this is a daily show. By
Right.
the time you get done digesting this, one can go in for another helping. It's like an unlimited buffet that never ends with all kinds of different serving stations. And again, That's perception. There's so many times when I did so many challenging things well because I started out with the right perception. I understood, hey, this is what I'm going to be the best at. You know, even though it's not something I would choose, but if it's chosen me or I find myself in this situation, I'm going to make the best friend of it I can until it gets out of here, right? Because it shouldn't sap your energy. It should maybe coexist with it.
Right.
But I think that's where people need other people who can share pieces, because that's another issue. People are always like, I did my share. Why should I do any more? Or I'm doing more than 50-50. And I say to myself, even by the time you bring this up and discuss it, you could have got it all done already.
And
Right?
why are we weighing it all? I mean, why are we putting it all on a scale? Right?
Yeah, well, and the thing is, why are we bringing attention to it? It's like, hey, why don't you put your clothes away? And someone's standing right next to it with the basket. And, I know it would be a hidden secret for someone to do things like that and not make it known. But I always say, by the time you talk about it, it could have been already done, And here's the thing. People eventually figure out what is and what isn't. They say time will either promote you or expose you. And if you see and watch other people doing things that go way beyond what you deserve, because I've had people help me and I didn't understand why. I said, "What are you doing this for?" I mean, it seems like it's for me and not for you. And they would say, "Well, because I can," would usually be the reply. And because I've been in your situation and I wish there was somebody who could have come along that would have helped me. So what you think is important to someone who's giving it might think of as a responsibility or a pleasure, right? I mean, if you had the third sandwich you couldn't eat and you saw a really hungry person, the benefit to them is really helping you get rid of that sandwich,
Right.
unless it was your first. But now that's the challenge. Can you give your first sandwich away to someone?
Or at least share it, right?
Yeah. And I think that's where people challenge themselves to be better with people than to be better to themselves, right? In a sense, because you're good enough. You don't come into every day missing something, and when I'm good enough. And, I used to say to myself, how happy could you get how early in the day? What would it take to get you happy by 9:30 this morning versus waiting until 7 o'clock at night and saying, well, I finally got my last thing in and now it's time to start another day. Go ahead.
I was going to say, start off with music. I like to dance. So if I, instead of watching the news or paying attention to the news, I spend a few minutes just listening to music and dance. It shifts the energy and it makes me want to go out into the world being able to do that too. So you can do that. You can do that as early as waking, first thing in the morning.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people, it's really having a starting routine. I mean, in a cold day, if your car's outside, you got to give it time to warm up, right? I mean, and it's much nicer when you do because it gets warm inside if you let it warm up. And the same thing is whether it's meditation, whether it's exercise, whether it's counting your blessings, whatever it takes, how much measure you need to give yourself to fortify yourself, right? Just like sleep, just like food, how hungry you are, how tired you are. If you focus on another need that isn't as physical, like food or sleep, and really give yourself the benefit of thought. And that's why I think listening to audibles, listening to music, letting people change your mind. I mean, there was a time in business when things were just the worst. I never thought they could ever be like this after being so elevated. And I found that cassette tape, Think and Grow Rich.
Okay.
And I had, it was a while ago, I had a cassette deck in my car. Wasn't 8-track at least, but I played that honestly for a year, every day on the way to work and every day on the way back. And it was just 2 cassettes. I could have mouthed it after a while. But what happened is when I left home to when I finally got to work, my whole mind changed. And when I left work, which was sometimes challenging, and before I got home, my mind changed. And it was just like, this works. And you know, that's why if you go to a doctor and you say, I got a headache, and they say, well, here's an aspirin, and you say, how does it work? And you say, swallow it, you know, that's all you got to know. That's how it'll work, right? You don't got to know the ingredients or who invented it. I mean, it's, if you like, you can. And it's the same thing as if it works, believe it and keep doing it. And if it doesn't work, change it. Go ahead.
And we have that choice. I mean, whether you're walking, whether you're, whether you're meditating, whether you're dancing, whatever you're doing, that can shift your energy, your perception, that can make you feel good about yourself and starting the day or ending the day. We have some responsibility for that, and we have choices, and we can do that. And we have to be aware of what those choices do to us, and how that changes our perception and how it takes us through our lives.
Yeah, and I think as you get older, and that doesn't mean only by age, but maybe in wisdom, you tend to enjoy living vicariously through others. You know, what I used to love to do, I wouldn't go on a roller coaster for all the money in the world today, you know, but I would be happy for those who enjoyed it and liked it. And I think that's where judgment comes in, is when you know you're ignorant about something and you decide, hey, I'm not going to judge it because I don't know enough to be a judge, right? If someone says, look at this painting, and you say, all I see is oil on paper or something, I mean, it's interesting, but I can't tell the difference. And that's something you should give yourself credit for, is you shouldn't be majoring in the minors. You know, you should be focusing on the major parts of your life, and bless yourself every day for just being able to have gotten this far and enjoyed so much already. Because, you know, when you get to the point in life when you believe sincerely, no one owes you anything, right? No one owes you tomorrow. No one's guaranteed that,
Right.
right? So why do you look for others to make up for something they're not even responsible for and probably aren't even aware of, unless you're the first person to go first, right? And if you tell somebody, here, you know, and not depressing, but, you know, here's what I'm really dealing with today, you know, and it could be really valuable, it could be very important, it could be very funny. But once you can break that out, and, you know, it's just like our word of the day. It's like, okay, now that's where we're going to focus, right? Most people, like, what can I do for you, is what they're saying when they say, how are you? You know?
Even if and I was thinking historically, so people look at the inventions, airplanes and technology, and people initially would think, we can't do that. You can't do that. We don't even know that exists. We have to be able to even get beyond what we thought and what we were convinced was not possible or impossible. And we can move forward with that, not only for ourselves, but in terms of being able to do things for the world and for each other that may not have happened before. Isn't that beautiful that we have that ability to make those shifts, to perceive things that may not have even been and now can be or will be, and make a difference?
Yeah, well, that's the thing, is everybody can make a difference. Could be a small difference, could be a multiple amount of difference with a bunch of people, could be focused difference with one or two people. And, you know, if people see you, that you're on your way, that you're happy, like I always refer to the Forrest Gump movie, when he
Right.
started running across the country. And before you knew it, he had this mob behind him who had no idea where they were running to, why they were running. But because everybody was running, you know, they decided to run. And I think so many people are in yours, you know, there's that story I mentioned about a high school dance where, go ahead, you go first.
It reminds me of many, many years ago. I was in Vancouver, and it was the night of the aurora borealis, and the whole sky was lit up. And it was in an area where it was countryside, and there were cows, and it was also a full moon, and all the animals around were making sounds, okay? And I was a little crazy then. And there was this great hill, and I'm running up the hill, like just being, howling with the moon. And I was at first alone, and then all these people that were started to do the same thing, and there we are. And it's like we were having a great time, but sorry. It was a little crazy, but it was fun, and it was, enjoying the moment and being able to do things because I mean, I was an animal with all the other animals, the cows and the sheep and everybody, and there we were, and it was a great night.
Well, you have to believe that that's happening right now somewhere in the world with someone else, and it's people don't open their eyes to beyond what they're looking at before, instead of what they can create and participate in. And you can make magic out of about anything if you really took the time, effort, and thought. I mean, you can make the best peanut butter sandwich in the world today, right? It's not that hard. A couple pieces of bread, some peanut butter, and whatever you want to throw on top of it, and then savor it, cut it in little pieces, take your time eating it, you know?
Share it with your neighbor, right?
Well, and eventually, and you took something and made it into much more because of how you packaged it, how you presented it, how you appreciated it. And then, again, if little things will make you happy, you're not waiting in line for the big things to make you complete, right? And if all you, and here's what's so interesting, and I've been in situations so many times, I can't tell you, especially younger, where people said it's never been done, you can't do it, it's impossible. And I'd always say, well, maybe that wasn't the right time they tried it, or maybe they weren't the right person to stick with it, or maybe wherever I start isn't going to be where I finished anyways. So, I know one thing I believe in. There's things I've yet to learn and people I've yet to meet that I will, that could make that piece of the jigsaw puzzle complete for me. And if you know that, it's just a matter of when. If someone gave you $1 million check but couldn't be cashed for 2 years, but you knew it was going to get cashed and it was real, you'd be living like, hey, I can put up with about anything because in 2 years, every day I get closer to whatever it is I want. And if I can't do it, maybe we can do it. And I think that's the spirit people have to get into, is you're only going to be who you are and as strong as you are. And if you don't have enough to cover yourself, borrow something in return for something that's valuable to the other person in their own way. They say the golden rule is doing unto others as you want done unto yourself, right? But the platinum rule is doing unto others as they want done unto themselves. And that's where judgment and perception don't have to apply. And that's where meeting somebody where they're at and say, what is it I can do for you right now that can make a difference? Right? And that's easy. You make it easy for the person. Some people, they kind of kick the tires and it's like, I hope he doesn't or she doesn't ask me for this, but I'm still going to offer help, So again, how unselfish is it truly? How gratified are you when you see somebody who put a smile on their face when they didn't think there was one that was ever going to show up again, And if you can say one step will get you to the next step, but more importantly, I'll be here tomorrow if you need me. That's what people want to know. It's like, yeah, okay, like give a guy a fish and teach him how to fish. It's the same thing as it's a handout, it's a hand up maybe, but it's really, I'm here for you. Here's my number. I can't tell you how many people on the show come on and say, if you're dealing with this or you need to talk to somebody and, you do it in a sincere, respectful way, I'll find time, right? If someone's in a terrible situation, I'd feel bad if I knew they could have and didn't, only because I didn't make myself available or accessible. You never want to walk around with guilt or shame, and sometimes overcompensating in areas you've been undercompensating in, and undercompensating in areas you've been overcompensating. It's about balance. So, final words to kind of wrap this up. It's the fastest hour on LinkedIn. I'll tell you that.
I think, again, we can make a difference. We can shift our perception. We can shift our judgments for ourselves, for other people. And also remember what you do have, the little gifts, the fact that I have hands and fingers and we're having a conversation. Isn't that beautiful, rather than saying it's cloudy and again, we have a choice in terms of how we view our lives, ourselves, each other, and let's make a difference. Let's be there for one another. Let's be there for ourselves too, and have a beautiful perception of today. It's a beautiful day, despite that we're going to have a storm here in about 3 hours. I still think it's a beautiful day. And Donald, thank you so much. You're a gift, and all these beautiful people. Thank you. I enjoyed being here.
Well, you've been unbelievable. I mean, you took to this like a duck to water as far as because I know there was a little trepidation,
Yeah.
and there always is. But once you fall into the audience, it's like falling off the stage and knowing someone's going to catch you. You know, it shows, and it encourages people to maybe move the needle for themselves, or maybe use one of these sayings or thoughts or perceptions in sharing it with somebody else. You know, sharing is caring.
Well, you have a great safety net, so thank you.
Well, it's good to be here myself. I wouldn't be here either if it wasn't for all the people, because what comes around goes around, and everybody, you know, they say don't ask for a lighter load, ask for broader shoulders, right? And if you can strengthen yourself while strengthening other people, now you're really getting into win-win-win territory. And if everybody wins, nobody loses. And it shows you everybody can win, because the win is the resource and the gold inside of you. You know, you're not taking a finite something and splitting it. You're taking an infinite capability and expressing it and then building on it, right? And, you know, I think that's so cool, is to really have the before and after picture. And with that comes a story. And the story never stops if it's told properly. So with that, rest up. 23 hours from now, we'll have Kofi here for the first time. Really great guy. And also Wesley Flowers will be with them. So, and she's just a wealth of information. It's just come on strong in the last few weeks. So I can't tell you, you know, individuals, you know, like Dr. Joanne, like Kelly, like Dean, like everybody in this audience is really family, you know, and it's a chosen family. But everybody, to be a good family member, needs to be able to respect and share. And that's what this program does. And you know, people actually say, geez, I thought I was on empty and I really had a full tank. But my perception was I was missing something, instead of now I got this huge abundance of overflow to share. So again, we could keep talking, and we probably would, but you know, we need to allow people to get on and use this stuff. So thank you very much. Come back in a day and we'll be back. Bye for now. Take care.